swag vibe, baby.
Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cup of Joe Show. I am very excited to welcome my friend Jack F. to the show. Jack has been in recovery since June of 2013, celebrating 11 years of sobriety. He has been married to the same amazing woman, Kathleen, for 32 years. And together they have two wonderful adult children, a son and a daughter. Jack was born and raised in the Bronx, New York. Jack comes from humble beginnings, growing up with his mom and dad and two older sisters. He's a proud veteran. Thank you for your service, Jack. He served as a U.S. Marine and proudly dedicated his career to law enforcement. In 2016, he moved to Georgia before ultimately calling Tennessee home. Jack lives by a simple but profound truth. Today's the day. It's the only one we have. And today we get to hear about his journey, the lessons he's learned, and how he continues to walk the path of recovery, faith, and service. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in. How are you doing, Mr. Jack?
Outstanding, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Now I probably didn't even have to tell anyone where you were from. Just as soon as they hear your accent, it's a pretty unique accent to have in the South, I believe. So,
yes, it is. And
what was it?
Okay, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's a great conversation starter. You know, whether I'm in Walmart or whether I'm in a meeting, everybody kind of partners up and listens, and it's good. I do great texting. I can text you all, no problem, and nobody knows nothing. But once I open my mouth, the gig is up.
You text in a neutral accent.
Yes.
So what was it like growing up in the Bronx?
Well, actually, Joe, I'm sorry. Before we got started, can we just grab a quick moment of silence to
Sure.
acknowledge the presence of God here for us and help him and acknowledge him and that he can give us the words to help somebody who's struggling, and that they may be able to be brought closer to him so they can live free from this addiction, this bad life that they've gotten into, and understand that he's the answer. So
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Joe. All right. So what it was like growing up in the Bronx, right? Was that what the question was?
Yeah.
It was eventful. I mean, I basically describe it as, we were not well to do. And I remember that being a big part of growing up. I mean, we weren't dirt poor, but we weren't well to do either, you know,
right.
and it was because of my mom that was pretty much the bread maker, because my dad, unfortunately, he suffered from alcoholism too. And it seemed like we always struggled with finances, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing was, he was a pretty semi-violent person, you know. So there was a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if he's going to be in a good mood or a bad mood, you know.
Yeah.
And things like that. But I managed to go to school. You know, we went to school. My sisters and I went to school. We went to Catholic school, and grew up in a neighborhood that was blue collar neighborhood, primarily Irish, Italian, Polish, and some Puerto Rican. So it was a nice mixed bag, and so that was it was.
What was it? I mean, I can imagine probably having an alcoholic father, it kind of was contributed to maybe some instability or that kind of stuff. Like you said, financially, but also I would think emotionally,
Oh, for sure, without a doubt, because there were times where, we didn't know if he was going to come home drunk or not, and sometimes, he usually worked the night shift. So if we heard the key go in the door, it was like, wait a minute, what? He's coming home now? Maybe, we didn't know what. And I do remember times, heading to my room because I didn't want to know, or just like kind of waiting to see, like, is this going to be good or is it going to be bad? And, and that actually, it's my understanding that was a survival skill that I developed very early, in order to be able to read the room and read people, and to my benefit later on in life,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how that stuff works. It sounds you took a childhood maybe weakness. It's not weakness in the child, but a childhood fear and turned it into an asset later on in life. And I know we'll get into that. What was did you have thoughts about alcohol at that time? Was it something that, did you have any, like your attitude towards it was like, oh, I'll never be like that or anything?
That's exactly it. I didn't want to interrupt you, but that's usually how I describe it. I'm not going to be like him. I swore off alcohol in my teenage years, because I didn't want to, I didn't want to be like him. I could see the effects of it, and I could hear my mom speak about it and how it affected us, but that didn't keep me from developing escape mechanisms, which was usually weed, during the high school years, and then when I and I kind of made, it was kind of like, in a way, protected my mom to show her that, I wasn't going to be like him, know, and my mom suffered from, some disability. She had some trouble getting around, physically, and I would spend a lot of time helping her out, doing some things, so I never wanted to make her feel like, she was going to have to worry about me doing that,
Yeah.
So I kind of stayed away from it. I'm not saying that I didn't drink during high school. I did. But I wasn't out of control or anything along those lines. And until I went into the service, and once I went into the service, of course, because of the urine tests, I wasn't able to smoke the weed, so I started drinking. Plus, I wasn't around my mom, so I didn't really have to uphold that promise or that image that I wasn't going to be like him. So I started, drinking while I was in the service, which was I just replaced one thing with another, really.
Yeah. Were there any signs early on that this might be a problem, or was it, or no?
Well, I like to talk about my the first time I got drunk. And I remember it. I was the apartment that we were living on. We moved out of there when I was in the 6th grade. So this happened while we were living there. So that puts me in the fifth grader. So that's about 11 years old.
Yeah.
And, we were at a Christmas party, a friend of mine, and we were at a Christmas party down the block, and we probably had 2 cans of beer or whatever. But anyway, we come back to my building, and we were messing around in the hallway, and we basically broke some hallway windows. And he went one way, I went the other way, and that was it. So there was an incident, directly related to drinking in the beginning,
Yeah.
And I remember, my mom, or I remember the superintendent of the building talking to my mom about it, either the next day or a few days, talking about how somebody broke the windows, somebody broke a window, and I was like, all right, I ain't saying nothing, So there was that that, I mean, you can interpret that as a sign that that there was a problem related to drinking,
Sure.
And then as time went on, I AA has that checklist of, questions. It used to be 10 questions, then it was 12. Now it's 20. I don't care how many questions you ask. I check pretty much all of those questions.
Yeah.
Or answered yes to them at one time or another in my life.
So you said you in the military is really when you're out, your drinking accelerated. Is that would that be a fair statement?
I'm sorry, you broke up.
In the military, is that when your drinking really accelerated, or was that just kind of the start?
I would say it probably accelerated. When you're in the military, there's that attitude. Work hard, play hard. You're a man amongst men, and for a young 20-year-old, with the pressures, the peer pressures, it was affected. I definitely probably drank too much, more than I didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
When did you experience any troubles either, at that time, or when was the time you started realizing, this might be an issue? Was it after the military?
Yes, actually, I drank for a very long time. I guess I drank for a very long time, not admitting that it was a problem at all. It was just something that I did. I didn't have a problem because, I had a job, I had a car, I was living on my own, I was functioning, and I just, getting into fights, losing my keys, living paycheck to paycheck, those are things that I just thought happened to everybody. That's just the way of life, that's just like normal. And but it's not normal. It's not. It's
No, it's not normal. I know. I thought the same thing. Yeah, the losing of the keys, the all that kind of stuff.
The fights,
the sweats. Oh my God, the relationships that were just like, oh, I don't like them anyway, and you realize looking back, no, it was me.
Yes. We'll get into that in a minute, I'm sure. But I like to say I didn't have a problem drinking until I tried to stop.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that really came around and hit home later on. But yeah, as far as the early signs, I guess if of course I've reflected back, I've thought about it many days. I don't live in the past, but
Sure.
I do. I you write it down on paper, you speak to somebody, the signs are clear.
Yeah, and you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Well, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, Jack, but I just like, what was the lowest point or one of the lowest points that you experienced drinking?
Well, of course, the lowest point was probably the weeks leading up to my last drink, of course, or maybe even I can expand upon that further out of more than weeks, most likely months, or maybe the last year or two. That's when I was really hitting a low. But there were problems. There was some moments, like where trouble really knocked at the door. I didn't have money. They turned the lights off. They disconnected the lights because the bills weren't paid. I thought I was in trouble with my job. I thought I was in trouble with my wife. Real pit in the stomach type moments. Real moments, and but they were short lived because as soon as the problem was either fixed or covered up, then it was like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. Was I know we'll probably get into a little bit the last time, like you were talking about when you drank, but before that, was there any moment that somebody, may have said something like, you might have a drinking problem, or that you recognized it yourself anytime before that?
There was a time in where some coworkers have made some comments, you're going out again tonight. You got to slow down, buddy. Stuff like that. But no, I was never really reprimanded, through work. So no, there was no incident. There was no official,
Right.
somebody coming to me and saying you got a drinking problem. At that point, because I stopped by. You've heard me say this, Joe. I stopped by AA in the '90s for a few minutes, it was during that time where the stuff hit the fan, in the sense that kind of like a storm developed, between the job, the home, and I was like, all right, I gotta go to rehab. I got a problem, and But within 2 weeks, within 2 weeks of being there, the heat was off. My wife come to visit me. I got an update on things, and everything was fine. I was like, all right, let's go. We can wrap this up.
Yeah.
So after that, I left. I did the rehab, the 28 days, and then I was required through my job to kind of do a 90 and 90 in AA, and then like an additional 3 months through a work related program.
Okay.
And I did the 90 and 90, and it was a true 90 and 90. I didn't drink during that 90 days, and but I drank before day 100 because it was I didn't do anything. I just went to the meeting. I sat there. I listened. I kind of rolled my eyes maybe once or twice, we can both safely say, now I wasn't ready. It wasn't for me. And then I just kind of ducked and weaved until I was cleared with the job, and then I was just really a closet drinker, because I wanted to try and hide it from the job. But you can't hide that. I mean, eventually people know,
Yeah. We never think they do, but they always do, they always do. I was talking to somebody, we were talking about the vodka. Drink vodka because nobody will smell it. I literally thought that at one time in my life. I was literally convinced.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that it was in a Starbucks cup, right? It's in a Starbucks cup, or a big gulp from 7-Eleven. It's like, well, wait a minute, but no, that's us living in that fantasy land that of the denial.
We swim. A friend of mine used to always say, we swim upstream in a river of denial for a long time.
That's right. That's right.
So after, kind of you got everything kind of settled down, how much longer was it until you kind of, you went on for a while after that?
Yes. So that was in 97. So it was another 12, 15 years before I started realizing again, and there were periods and moments that my drinking was probably, out of control again. And my wife would mention, hey, why don't you? Now, I'm no stranger to AA, and I'm no stranger to addiction either. I've had friends, family, relatives. I remember going to an Alateen or an Al-Anon meeting when I was in grammar school because my father was trying to go to AA. So my mom went to Al-Anon, and I remember guys coming over my house when I was in high school I'm thinking now I know what they were doing. They were trying to 12-step my dad, right? Yeah. And these guys were in AA, and so I was no stranger to it. So throughout that drinking period, I would hit kind of peaks and valleys where I'd be like, oh, I got to go back to AA. I got to stop drinking. This is getting crazy. And then times would be like, I ain't going back to AA. That place stinks. They got nothing. They don't know what they're doing. I don't need them. And then sometimes my wife would just give me a little poke and be like, why don't you call John? Why don't you call, James or Mike? These are all guys that I grew up with that are in AA and really walking the walk, and sometimes I'd be like, yeah, you're right, I should call them. Let me try and find their number, and I never did. And then other times I'd be like, I ain't calling him. No, get out of here. I ain't calling him. And I say that, but that's one thing that I was different from my dad. I was not violent. I was never violent. Right. I was never, I probably raised my voice, maybe dropped a couple F-bombs or whatever, but I wasn't I wasn't mean. I wasn't violent, So that's one thing that I did not inherit from him, which was good.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this 12-year period, obviously your drinking's progressing. So what was the point where you were like, I personally need to do something different. I need to seek help? Or what was that moment like?
Well, personally, knowing that I needed to do something different, I did. I tried wine. I tried beer. I tried vodka. Then I tried Jack Daniel. So I was trying, right? I was trying different things.
Yeah.
Right? But they weren't working either. So, like I said, during that, I guess 13 or 14 year stretch, I went through periods where I knew I should be stopping. I should try and do something, but I never did anything other than maybe slow down a little bit, take a break, or but it was all self-directed. I never went to a meeting. I never sought help.
Right.
I never, there was a period of time where I did go into counseling. I went into some counseling after September 11th, and that was just compounded to the 100th degree, because here I'm talking to people and now they start with the medications, I can't blame them. It's not their fault one bit. It's all my fault, because they were only acting upon what I was telling them, and what I was telling them was all lies. So, they so the prescriptions they were writing, and that was a very brief period, because I never liked that feeling. So I kind of took myself off the meds as quick as they put me on them. And I remember them, they would continue to write the scripts, but I wasn't taking them, because that was just part of the lie. I was like, oh yeah, they're good. Oh yeah, it's helping. But I wasn't taking them, because I didn't like the way they made me feel. Except the sleeping, there was some sleeping pills. But you mix that with vodka, that's not a very healthy cocktail. And I have scars on my head from falling because of it. So, but that was, I corrected that. I self-corrected that quickly, but I never stopped drinking though, but again, I take full hit for that. It's not their fault. They had, their heart was in it. They were trying to help. They were trying to help somebody that obviously needed help. But
I can't even imagine, Jack, how traumatic I was in, being in New York, being in law enforcement during September 11th, what that was then in the aftermath. I just thank you for your service for that as too, Jack.
You're welcome, Joe. No, there's that 2 weeks afterwards, there's brief moments. There's only brief moments that I remember about those few weeks afterwards. But most of it is, and it wasn't because I was in a drunken blackout either.
Right.
It was just, from that day on, for the next 2 weeks, I was down there pretty much every day, and so it was, it just compounded the whole life, the insanity, So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So what was the turning point, for I want to get into some of your recovery because I love listening to you, and I know that you have a message that people need to hear just in recovery. But what was the turning point or the jumping off point as far as really seeking help, finding AA and doing something different?
So, like we both know, this is it's described as a progressive problem, and and toward the end, I was experiencing physical symptoms, that I knew were way over the line from seeing my dad. He actually passed away. I think, I mean, his death certificate says pancreatic cancer, but it was just a complete collapse of his whole body because of his abuse of alcohol.
Right.
And that was progressive, and I could see that happening. So the shakes and the physical problems associated with that were starting to take hold, and I could see that, and I knew I was entering into, I definitely crossed the line, right? I knew I was on the wrong side, and at that point, I would say, I got to stop. I can't go on like this. I need to stop. And each day, for the most part, just about every day, I would say, I'm not going to drink today. And if you asked me, I'd say, I guarantee you I'm not going to drink. I promise you I'm not going to drink. I can guarantee you I'm not going to drink. And for some reason or another, I would take that first drink, whether it be because I had a good day or because I had a bad day, it was, I couldn't live with it and I couldn't live without it. That's basically what it comes down to. That's what it says. Bill Wilson once stated, it was no longer a luxury. It was a necessity.
Yeah.
And I definitely understood that, but I didn't want to live like that. But I had to live like that,
Yeah.
So that's how I was feeling toward the end. I woke up. I woke up one morning. It was June 28th. I woke up and in my bedroom in the home we were living in, there was a sliding glass door on the closet. It was a mirror from the floor to ceiling, sliding glass mirror door. Yep. And I on the edge of my bed was 5 feet from that, and I lived in the house for 6 years. I don't think I've ever looked at myself in that mirror, and on that day I looked at myself on the edge of that bed, and I just looked up and said, "Dude, hook me up." And dude was God, and hook me up was don't let me drink today.
Yeah.
And by His grace and His blessing, I haven't had a drink since that day. I went and I made a cup of coffee instead of a drink, and I sat on the couch looking out the window of the front of the house, and a little while later, my wife came out. And she passed by and she saw that I had a coffee cup. And she was like, "You don't have a drink?" I said, "No, I'm not drinking today." And that's what I said. I'm not drinking today. And she just kind of gave me the old, okay, well, fine. And with that, the person left.
Yeah.
Now, she didn't leave me, but she just knew that, she didn't want to be around me if I wasn't drinking, because, I would get irritable, restless, and discontent, just like anybody. I was like a baby without his baba, you know? And, so that was how it happened. But I mean, it was because the reason why I understand now, I was just completely defeated. I was deflated. I was I didn't have any emotion. I definitely didn't have any spirit in me. And, and I come to learn later on that that's exactly where God wanted me, completely defeated. So He was the only thing available left for me.
Yeah.
And He was there. So,
So what was your next steps after that, Jack? Like, what did you? I mean, what did you do that day?
So I detoxed myself for 3 days, right? And then afterwards, I started saying to myself, "Well, what am I going to do now?" I'm going to drink. I know I'm kind of out of the woods medically, but I was like, "What am I going to do now?" And I tell you, Joe, it was a light bulb moment, man. I was like, "I know what I'll do. I'll go to AA." You know,
Yeah,
like I was the first guy to ever think of that. Like I know what I'll do. And I went down to the closet, the basement closet, and I moved the Christmas box out of the way, and I put my hand in the box of the closet, and I pulled out my big book and the 12 and 12 and my, the daily reflection and the 24 hours, and I started reading that, and I found out where there was a meeting that night, and I went, and I just walked in, I sat down in the back, and the guy chairing the meeting was like, "You new?" And I said, "No, I'm not new," and he said, "Okay, well, welcome." And then I got a meeting list, and I figured out the meetings from there, and I was off and running. Hooked up with a couple of guys. They were very they had what I like to describe as solid sobriety because they all had God in their life. I mean, luckily, I connected with a group of guys that walked the walk.
mm-hmm.
And they had the attitude and the explanation. If you want what we have, you got to do what we do. And I got into the steps. Into the steps.
What do you think was the hardest part about getting sober?
I don't know if it was like, I know that I was that obsession was lifted from me very early. I was definitely done, and I'm a firm believer in that. When we're done, we're done.
Yeah.
And so the hardest part, I don't know. I don't know, because I took to the steps pretty. I adhered to them, so it wasn't like that first week was, I was bending pipes or anything. I was pretty chill. Like I was like, all right, whatever I got to do, I got to do. Because I'd seen the success in so many people. My best man, we grew up together. We were buddies our whole life. When I came in the last time, he was working on like 28 years. He went away right after high school, and he never picked up again. And guys that I went to high school with, three or four, five guys. Like, I'm not talking about a guy that I kind of knew. Like, these are dudes that I ran with. They were all sober. I mean, the first meeting I went to in '96, right? I walked in, and this was a big meeting, and it was smoking involved back then, and there must have been 150 people in that room, and this guy's banging on a chair, screaming my name. It was a folding chair. Going, Jack, over here. And I'm like, and then there was this guy Tommy I know, and he was like, "Yeah, over here, sit with me." And I was like, "How did he know that I was here? Like, I didn't tell anybody I was going." And he was like, yeah, here, sit here. I've been saving this seat for you. And
wow.
I didn't know that phrase,
Yeah.
And it's my understanding he's still sober today. So I knew the success, and I knew that it worked. So it wasn't like I came in the second time, the last time. I didn't have any resistance. It was just wide open. Tell me what to do. What do I got to do? I'm ready,
And that's cool that you had so many people around that could lead and you could follow. I think that's so important. We're great. I know I'm grateful for the guys that have come before me that I didn't have a clue how to live, no clue.
Yeah.
So
my sponsor, the guy who, what?
No, go ahead, Jack.
No, I was going to say the guy who sponsored me. I mean, our first meeting, we went to a diner, and this is, about a week back into AA, and we talked, and he asked me if I believed in God, and because if I didn't, it wasn't going to work, and he was like, this is a God program. It's his will being done, not ours. And and that was laid right out there up front, practically day one with him, and that's how I run it now. That's how, because it's all because of him, and if that was not present, I don't think I'd be here right now, Joe.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's hard to argue that fact, honestly. It's hard to argue that fact. How did you begin to rebuild trust in like relationships, maybe with your wife and all that stuff? How, while getting sober?
Well, I think my wife, and my kids, they were kind of at the point where it was like, just show me. Like she knew when I was, telling the truth and doing the right thing,
Yeah.
And she encouraged it. She's very much encouraged it. She loves it. I mean, she's very active in Al-Anon, and she's active in service to others, because she understands it too. And
will you explain to the listening audiences who may not know, like what is Al-Anon?
Okay, so Al-Anon is the family. It's called Al-Anon Family Group. That's what That's what Al-Anon is, and Al-Anon actually originated with Bill Wilson's wife Lois, back in the in the 30s when AA was just getting started. Lois saw that there was a need for family members to understand what alcoholism is and understand better what the person with the drinking problem, what their problem was, and to understand it better, because there was a lot of misunderstanding about it. Because the original AA meetings, it was a combination. It was basically it wasn't even an AA meeting. It was just a meeting, and it was a combination of family members and the drinkers. Like the drinkers and the family members were in the same meeting, and then eventually started breaking apart where, the drinkers would go into one room and the family members would be staying in another room. So she saw that there was a need for that to be more understanding, because, of course, anybody who drinks, their families are affected by it. Addiction affects not just the person involved, but it affects the family too. So that's what Al-Anon is, and it's a wide network, just like AA. It's everywhere. And they have websites, they have a online presence. If somebody's looking for contact information, they can find it there.
Yeah. Thank you for talking about that. How has your view changed on alcoholism in sobriety?
My view about alcoholism, it's I don't think my view has changed. I know that it's it can be a debilitating grip on somebody's life, especially when they're at that point, where, they don't want to live with it, but they can't live without it, and that I don't think has ever changed, I don't think that has ever changed. So my understanding of that is still very clear. So that I don't think that's ever changed.
Yeah. So what are some of the best things that have happened to you in sobriety?
Okay, some of the best things that have happened to me in sobriety. Well, one thing is my spiritual growth. When I came in, I quickly realized that, step one is the problem. Step two is the solution, and then steps 3 through 12 is how we get to the solution and keeping the solution, I learned in the book, it tells us the objective of Alcoholics Anonymous is to put us on a spiritual path, and put us on a trajectory that will never stop, and it hasn't for me. and I've been reunited with my faith, and I rededicated my life to Jesus, and I was rebaptized in 2017 as an adult, and that was awesome. And my growth in the church, and my growth in service with AA, outside of AA, is all because it originated in AA. But like I said, the objective is to put us on that spiritual trajectory. And for me, it's led me right out of AA. As far as not out of AA, I'm still, Joe, I'm very active, and so I guess the biggest advantage is being reunited with Jesus and being able to serve Him because of what He's done for me.
Yeah, and I know you're involved in other recovery programs, and that's important to note too. It's not just there's not necessarily just one way. This has worked for us, but you're involved in some other organizations, aren't you, Jack?
Yes, I'm involved in two Christ-centered recovery groups, and I'm what's referred to as a coach with the Renew Clinic here in Knoxville. And they're a Christ-centered recovery ministry, and then I've also been involved at my church in an overcome addiction ministry, which they're transitioning to something else. But it's so those recovery groups are Christ-centered and biblically based. As far as a solution. AA is great for me. At the time, for a lot of people that I know, they came in because they had confused God with religion. And it's not. We can stay focused on God and what He does for us, and not really be overly involved in that the politics of church. We can get the job done by just with the Bible alone. We don't so that's where my solution is focused now, in helping people. But I understand AA, and I respect AA's traditions. So when I'm in an AA meeting, I'll respect that tradition. I'm visiting, I'm in their house, and but the first opportunity I get, I'm going to let somebody know exactly what happened to me, and it's all about God. Yeah. And that's why I'm here, and unfortunately, people are resistant to that, like I was, and like I know many people. The first time around, I wasn't ready, and I understand that. And it tells us that too, that we carry the message, and it's not up to us whether or not they receive the message. We just have to deliver it, and what they do with it is up to them. It's between them and God, But I can plant the seed. I can plant the seed, and He can water it, and someone else can water it and grow it. So that's how that works.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. What role does service play in your recovery, Jack? I know you're involved with the ministries, but you're also very active in being of service to other people. I've witnessed that myself.
One of the things I liked early on was the hotline. And I've worked the hotline, I worked the hotline for years, and it's very beneficial. And it's not only you do get the drunk in the middle of the night that wants to fight you on the phone, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it. That guy is out there, right? But 99% of the other calls are people that truly want help, and out of all those calls, a lot of them have to do with the family members or friends, and they're calling with that desperation in their voice. What do I do? What do I do? My husband's killing himself. My daughter's lost. She, and what can I do? And a lot of times, eventually refer them to Al-Anon, or if they're members of a church, I send them to their church, so helping others is very satisfying for me, in the sense that somebody was there for me, so I'm supposed to be there for them, and I can't hold this in, what has happened to me, like right now, it's almost 10 to 7. It's 10 to 7 on a Monday night. I'm not supposed to be talking to you, Joe. I'm supposed to be sitting screaming at the TV, half in the bag, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm so, like, I can't hold it in. I have to tell people what happened, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And it's all because of the transforming power of God. I mean, that's where it lays. And I truly work for him. I serve him. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it in the hopes that I can bring somebody closer to God. Sure. And then they can get better, and they can get better enough where they can then bring someone else to God. And that's my reason behind it all.
Yeah.
That's the one and only reason, is to let them know that they're living in step 1, and the solution is step 2. And to get to solution 2, you got to go through 3 to 12 to get it and keep it. Yeah. And hopefully they'll get on that spiritual trajectory that I got on, that you get on, that we're both still on. And I know what you do too, Joe. And and hopefully they can get on that ride too, and be launched into that dimension that we can only get through our heart. We can only get it through feeling. We can't force it upon anybody. We can hopefully show them the way, and then they can grasp it and go for it.
Yeah, I think that's it's a hard lesson. I think we can't want sobriety more for somebody than they want it for themselves. And just like nobody could do that for me when I was ready, then I was willing,
Right.
So what's a typical day like for you, Jack? Like how do you kind of get your day started off right? What do you do, to kind of stay on the beam, so to speak, throughout the day?
Mm-hmm. Well, I usually start my day before I go to sleep. I start the next day before I go to sleep at night. Like, I end my day in preparation for tomorrow. And that I end in prayer, and it's really prayer. It's really repentance. It's really asking for forgiveness and repentance today for what I've done wrong, and hopefully hopefully God will keep me here for another day and allow me to serve him. And that's how I usually fall asleep. And then I wake up saying thank you. And hopefully I can be of maximum service to you today. Put somebody in my path that needs to draw closer to you, and I'm going to do what I can to make that happen, Lord. And then there's coffee, right? Then I get out of bed. Then I get my cup of Joe, and after 15 minutes or so, I have a devotional. It's a gospel devotional, and it's right now what it is the one that I'm reading now is basically a devotional that involves going through the whole Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, right? And it's a 1 year plan, and it's pretty practical. It's relatable in an everyday basis type of application. So it's not very theological. It's not very high, but it hits home. So, and then I after reading that, I reflect on that a little bit, and then I get going, and it's go time. It's hit the showers, and then I have a part-time job. So I do the part-time job, and then there's usually something going on as far as service. I'm also involved. I'm also enrolled in a class, a spiritual. It's just like, it's not a seminary class, it's a seminary level class, but it's to to understand counseling in a biblical way.
Okay.
You know,
That's interesting.
Yeah, because my development, Joe. Remember, I said I started on a spiritual trajectory that started in AA, and it wants me to continue. It tells us to seek outside guidance, and it tells us to never stop. And it's spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. We're never going to perfect it. Only He's perfect, right? But I can still try, right? I can still try, and recently in the last few years, my addiction, I've realized my addiction and a lot of other people's addiction is just a symptom, right? They talk about that in the book, right? Our drinking was but just a symptom, right? Basically, what I have is a heart problem. My heart is wrong for whatever reason. I mean, naturally, I'm born separated from Christ, right? And I'm a sinner by nature, right? And that's hard to break. And in my earlier years, I developed that addictive behavior because of my heart, right? Because I had a bad heart, I had a wicked heart, and now that I've changed my ways, and now that I've accepted Christ and I walk for Him, right? I'm able to change my heart, which changes my behavior. I don't have to drink now, and it's not that I'm not drinking because it's bad and I'm going to crash my car, I'm going to lose my keys, I'm going to get into a fight. I don't drink because I've been relieved of that because of Him. You follow me?
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm explaining this in a way that you can understand it. I've changed the way I believe, and that changes my actions.
Yeah.
And because I believe differently, I act differently. And that's the transforming power that takes place. When I change my beliefs, I change my actions. And if that's why, I don't really. I do sometimes out of habit, but a lot of times in meetings, I don't self-identify as an alcoholic anymore. Because that's like a form of self-deprecation. I know my past, I know my history. I'm not ashamed of it. I've accepted it, but that's not me. That's not who I am now. I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not that guy anymore. But again, when I'm in a certain house, if I'm visiting a certain place, I got to respect their traditions. I got to respect their procedures and their rules. So, so that's what's happened recently. And I say recently in the last, probably, definitely 6 to 8 years ago. I mean, I was given a copy of the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know if you've heard of the Sermon on the Mount. I know you have. And that was within my first few months of getting sober, back in 2013, and that's when I started. That's when basically I reaccepted Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount and through His teaching, and reconnected. But I never went back to church or anything like that. I just went back into to His Word, and I started living to serve Him because I realized what was done for me, over so I guess coming up on 12 years now, the change has taken place. But over the last 6 or 8 years, I've really, I guess you could say, come out of my shell over it. Like, I have no problem expressing myself with that, and that could be a little intimidating at first, because like I said, I mean, it was over 50 something years where I didn't live like that. So the change took place in my heart, but the visible change takes place. It's a little slower to take place,
Yeah. I remember being pointed to the spiritual experience in the back of the big book. And that was just really helpful because it even says in there, like the first line in it is, a spiritual experience is a psychic change just enough to basically not take a drink today.
Mm-hmm.
However, that spiritual experience manifests in the individual is different for sure. but that was helpful for me to at least get a start, to get a start back, because I had more, a lot of issues with God, and when I came into recovery, as many, like you said, many of us do, and so mine has been the educational variety, but I love that you're a spiritual risk taker. And I don't mean that, I mean that in the most complimentary way. I think you have no problem expressing what you feel in your heart. And I think that's just, I admire that in you, Jack, for real. I do.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. And like I said, it hasn't always been like that. And I struggled with that transition. You know that I've referred to myself, I'm a step 2 guy, right? Because that's where it all takes place, and that's that's probably the most
What
important
is step 2, Jack?
It's coming to believe that.
Tell us.
Okay. It's coming to believe that a power greater than ourselves. So at that point, I didn't have to believe in anything. And I explain that to guys. They don't have to believe in anything. They just have to believe that something out there exists. Right?
Yeah.
And once they believe that something and they're not believing in it, right? That's when we can at least make some headway. And maybe that's where we start with, what's your concept of God? What do you want God to be? And they write down, and I know myself the way it happened for me. I wrote down a series of character traits, honesty, knowledge, all-knowing, honesty, trustworthy, forgiving, humorous,
Right.
loving, right? All of these traits, they're just character traits of what I thought God should be. And then, I believe now through the Holy Spirit, confirmed all of those things are God. And that's where I was able to transition from believing that there was something out there, because I always had God. My mom brought me to Jesus when I was 10, 11 years old. I remember accepting Jesus, right? And her explaining it to me and me saying, yes, I believe it. And she says, all right, good. Because, you're going to do bad things. But if you understand that Jesus is your savior and he's done what he's done, and you get hit by a bus tomorrow, you better have clean underwear on, but you're going to heaven, right? And I was like, yes, Mama. But then I got away from it all, right? The whole house of cards came crashing down because I was out on my own and I was stuck in this world, right?
Yeah.
So getting back to that, but the transition from 2 to 3, believing that there's something out there, and now in 3, it's believing in something. And that believing in God and developing that understanding of God. And it's the God of the Bible. It's the God of the Bible. There's no doubt about that in my heart. And I've worked with guys that don't agree with me. They don't agree with me one bit, and I do my best to explain to them that if they want to go to heaven, there's certain things that they need to do to be at peace with God for eternity. And if they don't do that, they're taking a chance not being in peace with God for eternity. Some of them do, and some of them don't. And I'm not the guy to make that call. If I had that magic wand, man, I'd wave it if I could, but it don't work like that.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like to share?
No, it's just that process. The process of the steps is so valid. It's so freeing. I've been through the steps with a sponsor. With the outline of the big book. Then I've also done the steps in a biblical way with Christ, because there are steps out there that run parallel, and it's the same process. Mm-hmm. It's just instead of a higher power, it's the higher power. It's the highest power of all powers, right? And and those steps, I think, were much more beneficial when I went through them. The freedom I have now is it's unmeasurable. Just like the pain that I had before, the pain that I had was unmeasurable, right? The emptiness, now it's completely reversed. The joy and the peace I have is unmeasurable. I'm still in shock and awe. I'm still like, I still shake my head sometimes, and I do it in a thankful and grateful way, saying thank you for this.
Sure.
I don't understand why. I know why, but it's still sometimes hard to grasp.
Yeah.
But I know why. I know why. It's that it's that human part of me still.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you, Jack.
What?
I said I really appreciate you and your willingness to share your experience and your strength and your hope. I can't let you go without doing our rapid fire questions, Jack.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yes.
All right. So, are you ready, sir?
Okay. Yes. Deep breath.
All right. What is your favorite recovery slogan?
One day at a time.
What is your least favorite recovery slogan?
This is a disease.
What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
Jesus.
If you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be?
It's okay.
What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
The national anthem.
If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
Well, it's to have another good, to have a day just like today, because today was great.
Yeah, good. What step do you love the most?
2.
What step do you love the least?
1.
What is your favorite curse word?
Oh, well, I try very hard not to curse, Joe. But I guess dang it.
It's a good one. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates, Jack?
Well, heaven does exist, so I won't let you get by with that if question. And he's gonna say, "Welcome, my son. Welcome."
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jack. Just so everyone knows, a new episode is released every Thursday at noon. You can listen to the show in your favorite podcast apps, Amazon Audio, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, and others. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the. And we also appreciate if you like, subscribe, and share. Jack, you so much for joining me today, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
It's just a laid-back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's Experience, Strength, and Hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to The Cup of Joe Show.